Rhododendrons and azaleas and ferns there. And then in the sunny corner in the back garden, I put the herb garden, and right next door to that, the vegetable plot, because it wouldn't really be a garden unless I was growing vegetables. And to link the whole lot together, I've used lawns. So, instead of being a series of individual items, it's a landscape. This, for me, is the most important part of the garden. It's the first bit you see as you come through the main gate. It welcomes you in, so it had to be choice. Not choice in the sense that the plants are difficult to grow, but I wanted the maximum amount of colour through the year. So I chose the things that went in very carefully. And just to make certain that it does welcome people in, I've used half-hardy annuals as bedding plants among the more permanent shrubs. And surprisingly enough, it all started the way many gardens start, with a great big heap of builder's rubble. It was as the builder left it, full of rubble, full of concrete debris. I had the foundation to chip off there because it overhung too much. And now, by digging everything out, I've got a working depth of about 15 inches. But in building the walls and laying the paving flags, I've walked on this, I've almost danced on it on occasions, I've rolled paving flags over it, and it's very, very hard. If I leave it like that, no matter how deep the soil I put on top, every time it rains, with this being surrounded by paving flags, the water will gather in here, and the sort of shrubs and plants I'm going to grow will not tolerate having the roots drowned out every winter. The only thing I can do is to pick it over, to get an ordinary builder's pick and dig it over to that depth. That's increasing the depth again of the drainage by about 10 inches to make certain that no water is going to come up to kill out the fine feeding roots during the winter. And talking certainly won't get it done. I've left a lot of the rubbly pieces in because that too will help drainage. There now, that is worked as completely as I can do it with a pick. Every scrap of the soil turned over, and what I've got to do now is soil it, fill it in with soil. But in addition to the soil, I want a soil that is so physically fit that it'll grow anything. So I'm going to put in anything that'll rot, from farmyard manure to the green weeds out of the garden, provided it isn't wicken grass or dockens, anything that'll rot down into the soil, break down into that black material that we call humus. Then the soil will be in first-class condition. And it's a good idea to start at one end. And that soil has a lot of fibre in it, even little pieces of grass, but there's no perennial weeds, nothing that's going to grow and interfere with the plants. But most important of all, it's acid. There's no lime in it whatsoever. Lovely stuff. And to maintain the soil in good condition, I'm adding good, well-rotted farmyard manure. Now, if you can't get manure, you can always use peat and bone meal mixed together. And all you've got to do now is spread it about, because you don't want too much in one place. You see, that's quite adequate. There's enough there, just a thin dressing. And the ratio I work on is, what, about 1 barrel load of manure to 6 of soil. Now we reach the exciting stage. This is the bit that I like the best. You've got all the preparation done. The soil's in the best possible condition to receive the plants. And now I'm going to bring the plants, lay them out, because they're all in containers. I can move them round, shuffle them round. Even though I know the design is right in my mind, I want to check it first. This is my selection of plants. Now, if you live in a warm, sheltered part of the country, I have no doubt it would be entirely different. You'd have tender things. But this garden is exposed, and not only do I want slightly unusual plants, I want them to survive as well. But I guarantee that each one is going to, in due season, delight me. And this surely is what gardening's all about. Now I'm going to put them out. And rhododendron eucusimenum is the nearest thing to vegetable perfection that I've ever grown. But it does need shelter. And if you look at those fat, juicy buds there, once the bud scales are down, they're prone to frost. And I don't want to lose them, because once you've seen it in flower, and then as the young leaves break, you don't want to miss one item of that particular shrub's interest. Just handling plants to me is exciting. Even though I know them very well, doesn't matter. Still enjoy the business of handling them and looking at them and thinking, well, you'll be right there for the next 20 years. And Daphne mesoreum, this is the dark red flowered form, which I like very much. I want it near a much-used path and a door, because the fragrance from those flowers is absolutely lovely. And what's the point in having a fragrant flower if it's not close enough to enjoy the scent of it every time you pass? And I admit these shrubs might be a wee bit expensive, but I guarantee that by taking berries from the Daphne and growing them, cuttings from the rhododendron and the other shrubs, I'll have trebled my collection very, very quickly indeed. And the little rosemary 7 seas. Now, this is the prostrate form of the taller growing rosemary. Oh, yes, it's tender, but I'm going to take cuttings. There's one beginning to grow there. That'll be ready about the middle of June. Each autumn I'll do that as an insurance, but it is the most exquisite little plant, and it likes a hot sun-baked position. So there in the corner, and it can spread out over the curbstones and get baked to a crisp if it wants to. And dark evergreen shrubs are lovely because they give you that colour, that candancy in the border the whole year round. And this is Berberis varieculosa, which I've enjoyed always. Can you see the silver back to the leaf there? Beautiful. And then you get the flowers like yellow primroses individually up the stems in about, late April, early May. Now that will make a green mushroom arching out like that. It's prickly, it's far enough from the path to give it room to expand, because the one thing you don't do is stick prickly shrubs where they'll scratch people's legs as they go past. That's a lovely thing. Berberis varieculosa. And all borders need a focal point, a linchpin that you're hanging the design on. Now, I know Mahonia Apollo isn't wildly extravagant. It's not unusual in that sense, but I don't know of many shrubs that carry that much flower in late winter, early spring. Grand, when you're coming home into the garden and you see that welcome you, and what I intend to do is to plant round that, to fill a pattern in round it, a real welcoming feature. And then building the framework up. But until it. I don't think I could garden without the shrubby cinquefoils because they flower for months and months, right through the summer. And that one doesn't get very big. Little gold star, it just makes a mound of foliage. Some of them get up quite high, 4 or 5 feet, but that's only about 18 inches and it hummocks out. And Hebe. Autumn Glory, now I think this will be the hardiest of this particular group. I'm pretty certain it's going to take a severe winter to knock that out. And it has dark purple flowers in late summer and early autumn. It's important. I could fill this border with things that flower in spring. And then what would it be like for the rest of the summer dead? So what I've done, I've spread the colour as far as I possibly can. I've spread the evergreen habit as far as I possibly can. And the pattern is beginning to fill in. Good idea always to put your framework shrubs in so you get the line down the border. See whether the eye does really follow down whichever way you're walking along it. Yeah, that'll do. Get them planted in now and the icing on the cake comes after. The fringe plants around it. And basically, planting's the same for everything. When you've paid money for a shrub, you're daft if you don't make certain your soil is in good condition, that it's free from weeds, that it's got the nutriment there that the plant needs to grow. And then you make the hole big enough, and then you adjust the depth of planting to whatever it is you're putting in. The Mahonia can go down a little deeper than it was in the pot. Rhododendrons must never be deeper than the level they are in the pot. The soil level must be level with the root ball, the top of the root ball. Heathers, you stick them in as deep as you like. And after the main framework of shrubs are planted, you begin to put in the fillers, what I call the icing on the cake. And this is what brings the whole pattern together. And on the corner, because it's a very sharp edge and I want to welcome visitors to the garden and to the house, I've put some thyme. A little dark flowered one, they spread in a carpet right over the stones. They love the heat. And that's a dark red one with rather dark foliage called coccinus. And then at the back, to pick up the yellow and lift the height a little bit, the yellow-leaved thyme. Lovely, lovely plant that, because its yellow foliage is there right through the winter. And because I want plants that'll hang over the path edge and hide this hard edge, I don't like hard lines in the garden. Let's aspersum. The heavenly blue, vivid, vivid blue flowers for such a long time through the year. And that'll make a mat of foliage, and behind it, the fuchsia, the yellow foliage fuchsia called Jeannie. A lovely plant, that, and you get the combination of yellow foliage of the fuchsia, blue of the lithospermum, and then the fuchsia has dark red flowers. Then we come to what I call a focus point, the Mahonia, and round that, because they flower at the same time, the Ericacarnia Merton ruby. Now that is a real violent contrast of colours, but end of winter, what do you want? You want colours that brighten you, that give you an invigorating leap into spring. And that'll certainly do that. Lovely combination, that. And then round the daphne, what do you follow a daphne, that lovely sweet-scented cottage garden plant with? You want fragrance again, you want the same cottage garden influence, and lavender. The ordinary, commoner garden lavender. This is the variety called hidcote, which is upright, which has a deeper blue flower, but the lovely scent, the lovely fragrance of foliage and flower. And there are plant associations which I've used in gardens over many, many years. One is the association between a little hebe called Karl Teschner with deep violet flowers with a white eye, and a diascia, a twin spur that has pickaxe. I let them grow together because they harmonise so beautifully and they don't compete too much with each other. That's the main part of the bed planted up, but the wall looks very, very bare. Not for long, mind, because I've had shrubs in mind for this all along. And I believe in getting your wall plants, anything that you're going to train onto a wall while they're still young, growing them on elsewhere in the garden. And then when you've got them nicely shaped up, choose your position for them. And one shrub that I've always wanted, a conspicuous place for where I could see it whenever I was in the garden, and that's the firethorn, the pyracantha. It's a lovely evergreen, it has white flowers in May, and then in the autumn you get these orange berries, bright orange. But when you're planting anything on a wall, remember you've got the overhang there, the base of the wall is quite often, particularly if it's a house, dry, very arid. So step your roots out a bit. Don't put them bang up against the wall. Or you're going to make the shrub, particularly an evergreen, struggle from the word go. So I step it out from the foot of the wall, 10 inches at least. Now, apart from the aridity and dryness, there's another very good reason for keeping it well out from the wall base, particularly with things like roses if you're planting them. And that is, you get an air space, allows air circulation between the back of the shrub and the wall. And that cuts down very much the risk of disease. And I always take immense care when I'm planting anything, but greater care when I'm moving anything from one part of the garden to another, because this shrub is actually into growth. So I wrap the roots well up, no question of them drying out. I lift it with what I think anyway is a magnificent root ball, keeping as much of the soil intact as I possibly can. Twist it round carefully into position. Superb, absolutely great. And there's the benefit of training, you see. I'm making it into a sort of espalier with a tiered branch system. Grand. Nah, already that's beginning to grow up to hide that bare wall. And the border not only gets very narrow here, this is the windy end. The wind funnels down the side of the wall, and I want a shrub that's colourful and that's wind tolerant and that I can prune fairly hard because there's not a lot of room between the edge of the bed and the path. And I thought the ever popular japonica, the Kina Marlays, which is very wind tolerant in my experience, that I can prune hard enough to tuck it back into the wall. And look at that cluster of flowers there. You can imagine that repeated over the whole bush, over what is virtually a framework up the wall like that. Beautiful. And I considered the various methods of supporting the plants on the wall. I wanted something that was inconspicuous because the stonework is attractive anyway. It's beautiful without anything over the top of it. And yet I wanted something that would hold the plants firm in what is a very windy corner. And eventually I hit on the idea of plugging the wall, putting ordinary galvanized angle brackets onto it, drilling them and running plastic covered wire through. And there's sufficient space there between the wall to allow a gap of air so the air can circulate up behind the plants and stop them getting any diseases or any aphis infection or anything like that. And all you do then is, as the plant grows, you pop another wire in and fasten it in. And it's very important when you're tying the plant in that you don't tie it so tight that you strangle, that you cut the stem. And I use plastic covered wire like that. loop it round, and then just cross it behind the stem like that, and then round the wire in a loop. And that'll hold it firm, and then you can go around each year and check that that isn't biting into the stem and cutting off the supply of sap. It'll take a while for the quince and the firethorn to grow in. So what I've decided to do is to put a quick growing Clematis, Montana Rubens, in the middle to fill that space. And Clematis do enjoy root shade. They grow much better if they've got the feet in the cool and the heads in the sun. And the branches of the pyracantha, the firethorn, will grow over to give the root shade that I need. Apart from that, soil conditions are very good. The shoots are very soft and tender, and if you leave them loose to thrash about in the wind, they're going to get damaged. But just a little loop tie to hold that. And this is a lovely variety, Clematis Montana Rubens. It has pink flowers that are going to look lovely against the fawn of the stone. How do I know that? Well, there's a plant already in the garden that I grew from a cutting, and it's planted to grow up through an old apple tree. And it's one mass of pink flowers at the moment. And that's the main framework of the choice bed completed. But it'll take a little while for all the shrubs to grow in. So for the early part of the border's life, I filled in the gaps with half-hardy annuals. Now, they'll not interfere with the growth of the permanent shrubs because I'll pull the half-hardy annuals out in the autumn, but they'll give me ribbons of colour right down the length of the bed. And so, throughout the year, the border will always have something of interest. And what a welcome to the garden.